I have mopped the same floor for 11 years. That is not a complaint. I have mopped floors on 4 worlds, in docking bays and commissaries, and once in a hospital corridor that smelled of copper and disinfectant, and things I did not want to name. A floor is a floor. You push the water ahead of you, and you move, and eventually the job is done. This one just happened to be made of pale stellite tile that never quite dried right, and it happened to sit beneath the most thoroughly studied and comprehensively ignored object in the Verith Colonial Museum of Antiquities. The statue. 7 meters of dark basalt, arms at its sides, eyes sealed smooth as though they had never been meant to open. Recovered from the dig at Verith Station's original excavation site 63 years before I arrived. Scholars from 3 universities and 2 off-world institutes had spent 40 years pointing instruments at it, pressing calibrated palms against its chest, running spectral probes along the carved channels cut deep into its stone. 17 published papers, 14 graduate theses, 1 interdisciplinary summit that produced a monograph so thick it could have stopped a door. Nothing. Not a flicker. Not a resonance. Not a degree of warmth above the ambient temperature of the hall. They called the hall the Founders Gallery, which was a prestigious name for a room that smelled of recycled air and mild disappointment. The scholars cycled through in shifts. I came every morning at 05:30, when the hall was empty and the overhead lights had not yet shifted from their low night watch amber to the full cool white of operational hours. That is when I started talking to it. Not because I thought it would answer. I am not a man given to mysticism. I am a man given to mops and early mornings, and the particular quiet of a large room before the rest of the world has found its voice. I spoke to it the way you speak to a sleeping dog, or a fire that is going low, not expecting a reply, just filling the silence with something warmer than silence. The first morning I said, "Morning, don't mind me." I do not remember when it became a habit. It was before the 3rd year, certainly. By the 5th year, I was telling it about the weather systems over the Eastern Plateau, and about the cook in the commissary who had opinions about lentils that I did not share, and occasionally about my daughter, who was living on Carith Station by then and studying water engineering, and who I was proud of in a way I did not have adequate words for. The statue did not respond. The scholars would arrive at 0800, and I would be done by then, and they would set up their equipment and run their protocols, and at 1700, they would pack it all away and leave. I would come back to mop the evening pass. Sometimes I would nod at it on my way out. It seemed polite. This went on for 11 years. On the morning it happened, nothing was different. The amber lights, the stellite floor, which had developed a slight film near the base of the eastern pedestal from decades of visitors standing there and breathing. The smell of recycled air. My mop. I had been talking about the weather. We had gotten a hard frost the night before, which was unusual for the season, and the maintenance crews were already up, dealing with a pressure coupling on the northeast waterline. I mentioned this. I said the frost had made the dawn look pale and clean in a way I found pleasant, and that I hoped the coupling held, because the northeast residential block had 300 people in it who would not enjoy a cold morning any more than the coupling did. The glyph on the statue's left shoulder lit. I stopped. It was a single carved channel, perhaps 40 centimeters long, running at an angle from the clavicle to the upper arm. I had mopped around the base of the statue 10,000 times. I knew every cut in that stone the way you know a face you have lived beside. I had never seen it do anything except hold its shape in the ambient light. It was deep violet now, faintly, as though light from a significant distance was finding its way up through the stone. I stood with my mop and I looked at it. Then I said, because I am not a complicated man, well, that's new. The second glyph lit, then the third. They ran from the left shoulder down the sternum, in a slow descending line, not like a system powering up, but like a sound spreading, the way a word carries down a long corridor, and you hear it later from the far end, arriving on its own time. The channels filled with that deep violet light, unhurried, as though the stone were remembering something rather than activating, and the quality of the air in the hall changed the way air changes just before real rain. I should have called someone. I know that. There were 3 scholars in the East Wing whose credentials would have made this the moment of their careers. I did not call them. I am not sure I could have moved if I had wanted to. But honestly, I do not think I wanted to. I had been in that hall 11 years, and whatever was happening felt private in a way that did not belong to a committee. I spoke again, not to anyone, not expecting anything, the same way I had spoken every morning for 11 years. I said, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I'm not going anywhere. Every glyph on that statue lit at once. The carved channels ran from shoulder to wrist, from sternum to hip, up the long column of the throat, across the sealed eyelids, down the backs of both hands. Violet light in all of them, deep and steady, and the sound the stone made was not mechanical, not the grind of something unclenching after ages, but resonant, felt in the chest rather than heard by the ear, the way a large bell sounds in the moment before the tone fully arrives. The sealed lips parted. They moved slowly. They had never been designed to move quickly. The stone split along a seam I had mopped past 10,000 times without knowing it was there, and the sound that came from inside the statue was not amplified or projected. It was close. It was the sound of a voice that had been waiting for a specific frequency before it was willing to speak, and it had found what it was waiting for. The hall said, in a language I had never heard and somehow understood, the hall remembers its first voice. I do not know how long I stood there after that. The scholars found me at 0800 when they came in for their shift. I was sitting on the floor beside my mop with my back against the pedestal, and the statue above me still lit, still warm, all 73 carved channels running violet in the cool white of the operational lights. 3 of them ran out of the hall to call the director. One of them, the young one from Kareth Institute, just sat down on the floor beside me. She did not say anything, neither did I. After a while she asked, quietly, what it had sounded like. I thought about it. I told her, it had sounded like being recognized by something that had been waiting a very long time to recognize you, and that was the closest I could come to it. She wrote that down. The director arrived, then her director. Then 2 people from the colonial authority in pressed suits who had not been told exactly what had happened and kept looking at the statue as though they expected it to do something threatening. I told them, patiently, that it was not threatening. I told them this several times. No one asked me much else. That was fine. I am not a man who needs to be asked. What I know is this. 40 years of scholars with their instruments, and their spectral probes, and their published papers, could not find the frequency that stone was waiting for. 11 years of an old janitor talking to it in the 0530 amber light, telling it about the frost and the lentils and the water coupling, and his daughter who studies water engineering on Kareth Station. That is what it had been listening for. They have taken me off the mopping rotation for this hall now. The director says I am, technically, a primary research asset, and she said it with a straight face, which I respected. I still come in at 0530. The statue is still lit. It has not spoken again, but I do not need it to. I said my piece. It said its piece. Whatever I am, whatever bloodline runs in me, old enough that something carved from stone before this colony had a name was built to know it. I have had 11 years to get used to the particular feeling of being in that hall without understanding why it felt important. Now I understand. Some things do not answer to instruments. They answer to the voice that was always theirs, however long the wait, however humble the man holding it.